Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pollock and Thurston. Special start time today, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. There was no buy-in today. We are going live as we speak, moments before the scorecards will be read from the Tuesday night battle between AEW and NXT. Joined as always by the man behind Wrestlenomics, Brandon Thurston is here. Brandon, did you survive Tuesday evening's head-to-head battle?
I watched it live. I input the quarter-hour labels as I was watching it. I felt exhausted afterward and was glad that I did not have to review the show immediately after it was over.
How do we do this for 18 months? Like, that was my one takeaway last night. I never want to revisit both these programs weekly. And I mean, there was certainly a certain novelty to it at first, but that was a lot of wrestling in one night. And there was quite the period where we had this as a weekly occurrence.
So what did you guys do during the Wednesday Night War? I don't remember. Did you review both? I mean, you can't watch both shows simultaneously.
No, we still had it split up where Braden and Davey did NXT. Okay. We did Dynamite. Wow. But my night would usually be record with Way and then watch NXT afterwards. So it just made for, a super long night. I can't say I missed the fact that these are on separate nights, but so it is for one night only, where we had multiple editions from overruns to a 30-minute buy-in that was tacked in, and then 30-minute commercial-free starts to the broadcast.
Oh, it was more than 30 minutes.
At least 30 minutes, as Tony Khan warned us earlier in the day. Turned out to be 47 minutes without commercial interruption to start the show.
Something like that. And NXT actually went to a picture-in-picture ad break around 29 minutes, you could say. So not a full-screen ad break, but they did go in the middle of that. What was it, the Gallus and Tyler Bate and
Tyler Bate.
Yeah, that match. They went to a picture-in-picture ad break during it, like at 29 minutes, and then they went to a full-screen ad break several minutes after that. But yeah, a lot of time with no ad breaks.
That's the missing metric in all of this. Maybe one side will disclose how much ad inventory was made on the evening as a future point in their favor. Which show made the most money in that given time slot for their respective network?
Yeah, I don't think we'll be getting that. But yeah, it was. You'd think, like, I wonder how that comes together in terms of the ad-free time. If that's just time that they weren't going to sell anyway, that was just going to be make good time, or what?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be something that the networks are on board with whenever there is a big enough show. And in the case of TBS, you certainly felt like this was a completely reactionary method, but probably one that they were anticipating, given it's been, this has been a tactic used multiple times. But I mean, they were able to respond with their own commercial-free block instantly and got pretty much like 3/4 of the hour blocked off for that. It does tell you that TBS was giving them a lot of leeway as well. Like, this was not something where they were just looking at this as 2 hours of programming. They too were very competitive and engaged in this one.
Right. And did you notice Dynamite went off the air advertising? I don't know if they did this earlier in the show and I just missed it, but they went off the air advertising that Collision is going to start again at 7 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah, it was mentioned a few times during the broadcast. And yeah, we talked about this last week. So they went to 7 p.m. this past Saturday, which we kind of read into could only have been a reason to semi-avoid Fastlane because there was no sports on TNT that they were adjusting their scheduling for. But this Saturday, it makes you wonder if this is an unofficial experimental run, that this could be the new time slot for Collision that not only gives you an hour up on WWE shows, but it's an hour earlier than everything else that is on a Saturday night, for instance. So this is at least the second week that they're going to be trying this earlier time slot, which...
So I asked WBD and they just literally just got back to me saying, depending on the outcome of the Major League Baseball playoffs on Saturday, Collision may shift to 7 p.m. just this week to allow for potential spillover coverage of the baseball game. They say that they'll confirm that in the next day or so after the conclusion of tonight's playoff game. So sounds like it may or may not be at 7, but they will confirm. I mean, they're certainly advertising it as 7 on AEW last night.
Yeah, it was on the schedule, like on their online schedule for 8 earlier this week. And then it was on Wednesday, or yes, Tuesday's broadcast that they were promoting the new 7 p.m. time slot. So yeah, that's an interesting wrinkle to this if they end up getting another move out of this entire thing. We'll get into the Collision numbers a little later on because they were interesting to look at from this past Saturday. But just looking at Tuesday night in terms of the lead up, the promotion from both sides, any major takeaways just of how much each side put into this, how important the stakes were. They were certainly important to the players involved. But now that we are removed from this, I mean, how important are these numbers that we're about to get here in at least in the short term? Because I think in the grand scheme of things, this is going to be a blip.
Not that important, I guess. Like you wrote, it's bragging rights. I'm sure it's great for your relationship with your TV network. If you're able to say that, we beat, the other wrestling show, and as much as we talk about WWE and AEW being competitors, I'm sure there's a competitive nature between USA Network and TNT or their parents NBCU and WBD. I'm sure that they want to. We have numbers. Okay.
Oh, okay. Wait, we can get the drum roll, but yes, as we make sure you have all your confirmed numbers here. We can't get any digits wrong because God knows we'll hear about it. So, in moments, folks, Brandon Thurston. This is like announcing the Best Picture Award winner. He's got the envelope.
I have the envelope, and we have. So, what do you want to do first? Let's do NXT. NXT decisively won the night, both in total viewership and in the demo. 921,000 viewers for NXT, 609 for AEW. This is going to be a 0.30 in the demo for NXT.
That's massive.
0.26 for AEW. We'll have that will be tweeted in
0.32 to 0.26.
0.30.
Oh, 0.30.
0.30. Did I say 0.32? 0.30 to 0.26.
That's really close when you consider all the different factors here. I don't certainly NXT had the bigger show. They won the night. But for AEW to move to the Tuesday night of what they were up against, I think a 2.6, that is, that's below, I think, what you would look for on a Wednesday night, but not by what they do last week, a 0.28 with all the transmission issues and DVR problems. But
AEW last week did a 0.28. Yeah.
So, I mean, a 0.26 on a Tuesday, I don't look at that as like an embarrassing performance on Tuesday night. But in terms of that number, I mean, that would be in terms of NXT viewership. I mean, that blows ahead of these recent Becky Lynch-led shows that were some of the most watched. This would top that Halloween Havoc show of 2020, which was just under 900,000 viewers as well. Brandon is furiously, I think, doing all the calculations. And
I've already put out a wrong tweet with zeros across the board. So okay, 1 second. Yeah, I've just got to get the numbers.
Well, you
the
take
numbers
your
I said
time.
were correct.
So yes, if you were just tuning in, it was NXT winning the night in terms of both viewership and in the 18 to 49 demo. Both sides had fairly significant overruns, although NXT, it was like the usual overrun amount of about 9 minutes, I believe it was, featuring the Braun Breaker Carmelo Hayes match. Yeah. It was Dynamite.
828 minutes.
Okay, so 8-minute overrun, and it was Dynamite that went almost to a quarter past the hour. So they had about 5 minutes, I would say, unopposed at the end, and that featuring the end of Adam Copeland and Luchasaurus and about 5 dozen run-ins to complete the night with both of them.
I mean, it's really impressive that NXT is. I have to look at what the milestone is here, but 921 is unheard of for NXT on a Tuesday, and I want to say even back in the Wednesday Night War era, and this 0.30 in the demo, despite the fact that, remember, it was going against another wrestling show.
Yeah, I'm just looking here that historically for NXT, this is their first year. So throw out the first 2 weeks that they were on the USA Network was September 18th and 25th of 2019. Both those shows topped 1 million viewers. Then AEW starts October 2nd, and they only surpassed 900,000 viewers once that year. And I'm looking ahead here to 2020. And I mean, they're never hitting 900,000. So this unofficially would, sorry, the viewer count was how much again? 900 and what?
921.
So this would I think this is the third most watched NXT in history on USA. The only higher ones would have been the first 2 episodes, which were unopposed, that they were not going up against AEW Dynamite. So this was a huge success for the company, and they loaded it up to such a degree that you would have to think this is probably the ceiling of what they are going to be able to hit, because I cannot see them ever being able to replicate this amount of star power unless for some very special circumstances. John Cena is not going to be at their disposal pretty much ever to have this availability.
Right. We'll have quarter hours here. We should in a moment too. But yeah, I mean, we have, if you want the number of total viewers in the demo, is 396 to 346. But I will serve up quarter hours in a moment.
Yes. Well, there you have it. What do you take away from the AEW numbers on the Tuesday night? Like we have talked about this being an audience that traditionally they have been able to follow AEW, whether it's moving to a special Saturday night, whether it's moving to a Tuesday night, they have been able to mobilize that audience. This would definitely seem like they put a lot into this show, and they were up against very, very stiff competition. Anything
Yeah,
you take from that?
I mean, this was not a. I was not expecting such a wide margin either in total viewership. I was definitely expecting NXT to win, maybe by, I don't know, 100,000 viewers or something like that, but not to this degree where we have something like a 300,000 viewer gap in total viewership. And I expected the demo to be closer than this. I mean, we certainly got the impression that WWE wanted to make a statement here and say that, you know, you won the Wednesday Night War, and we want to downplay that as you just being our developmental and giving them a head-to-head battle against their show that was just loaded with main roster content, to make a statement to say, hey, this is what it's like to go against the main roster of WWE, I think was the sort of the intent here.
And we also here, as I am getting, so in Canada, I know everyone is at the edge of their seats to know
who won in Canada.
Well, it was kind of
were they actually going head to head in Canada?
They weren't, because NXT was only streaming on Tuesday night because Sportsnet 360 went with the Major League Baseball playoffs over NXT. So AEW was oh, you know what? Oh, man, did I really lead that one up? So we had Thanksgiving on Monday. So we are on the holiday schedule this week. So the numbers I was just sent was for Raw on Monday night. I got to wait till tomorrow to get the AEW numbers. So sorry for that anticlimactic buildup. But yes, once again, NXT 921,000 viewers, 0.30 in the demo. Dynamite 609,000 viewers and a 0.26. Yeah, it's quite more illuminating here as I associate it with the Wrestlenomics tweet and graph attached to it. I mean, they really did dwarf them in viewership. I would look at the 18 to 49 demo as, I actually thought it was closer than it was going to end up being, but the viewership, I mean, that was a massive gap in NXT's favor. And we will await, further breakdown of these numbers. But yeah, it was a great number for NXT, and they loaded things up with every star that they could imagine. And I guess the question will be what they come back with after this. Does this at all serve as a boost for NXT? Like, it's been a pretty well received product for some time now, and this is probably for fans of just your Raw or SmackDown that, if ever there was a week to sort of check in and see what NXT is doing, this was it. And if there was enough that this leads to, NXT being able to stabilize a bit on its own, or if this is just right back to normal levels next Tuesday.
So we have, I'm going to put it on the screen in a moment. It looks like in the demo, even there's only one quarter where Dynamite beat NXT in the demo for one quarter, and that is the third quarter of the show, which had the ending last few minutes of the Jericho and Powerhouse Hobbs match, the Adam Cole video, and the beginning, most of the Orange Cassidy and Rey Fenix match. Beyond that, it's other than that, it's a shutout in the demo even. And I haven't looked at total viewership yet, but I expect it's going to be even more decisive for NXT.
Yeah, I'm very curious as well about the 18 to 34 breakdown as well. That's been an area that NXT, I mean, you have kind of documented like how much NXT has grown that, particularly among men in that younger demo over the past year. And that's certainly, I mean, Shawn Michaels has stated it as much, like that is the primary focus of NXT at the moment is that particular demographic. And I think that's another feather in their cap to be able to claim that audience in a head-to-head setting.
Yeah. So here's quarter hours for the demo.
Look at this. Look how fast this man works.
And my Overrun arrows are not correct yet, so ignore those that say 8 minutes for both. It was not 8 minutes for both, but pretty decisive, as I said.
That third quarter is pretty, like, that jumps out at you in terms of, like, there was obviously if there was one segment you look at where there was a noticeable uptick for AEW, that was it. This is where, yeah. So as Brandon has it listed here, the ending of Chris Jericho and Powerhouse Hobbs, the Adam Cole Roderick Strong segment, and then Orange Cassidy and Phoenix, the start of that picked up. What is this?
This is total viewership now.
Yeah.
A shutout for NXT in the quarters. NXT leads AEW in every single quarter, including the overrun, which is not a quarter. It's something less than a quarter, but so 9 minutes for NXT, 14 for AEW. High quarter in total viewership for NXT is the quarter that had the backstage stuff with Tony D'Angelo, Channing Lorenzo, Cody Rhodes, Baron Corbin promo, and then the beginning, most of the Dominic Mysterio and Ilya Dragunov match. So that is the first quarter, I'm sorry, was larger, nearly 1 million viewers for the first quarter with Cody Rhodes, 991,000 viewers. Both of them started out at their peak, right? Because we have 731 at the beginning for Dynamite also, which had the Christian promo and the Bryan Danielson and sort of Strickland match.
And would look to be like the largest combined audience of the whole night. Like, we're looking at over 1.7 million viewers for that first quarter between the two. I mean, it was, it was a really strong pattern for NXT. I mean, they had some dips. I guess the third quarter being the pub fight, I mean, didn't I guess resonate with as many people, but overall, like, they.
So my patented conditional formatting rules indicate that the John Cena segment performed well because it exceeded the normal trend in that quarter hour by at least 5 percentage points, and it was up 6% from the prior quarter in total viewership, up 10% in the demo. Again, that's for the John Cena and Braun Breaker live promo that had actually 2 ad breaks in it. And despite, I mean, I'm doing this based on looking at the timestamps, and it had 2 ad breaks in it, but despite that, still overperforming what that quarter usually does. If we look at Dynamite, I don't know if there's anything remarkable here. We've got the latter part of the Jay White, MJF, Juice Robinson live promo. That's getting a lot of attention today. Up 1%, but doing a lot better than that quarter hour usually does for Dynamite when it's on Wednesday anyway.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this. Did the Tony Storm video hold people during that picture-in-picture? It looks like I don't know.
We want that right there. Quarter hour 4, where viewership decline is 12% for the first quarter hour that had any ads in it, and it did have the Tony Storm segment started, and then it went to picture-in-picture, and then there was some full-screen ads in there, and then the latter part of that quarter hour, this is going into the 9 o'clock hour, did have picture-in-picture ads through the Jay White and Adam Page match. So that declined pretty strongly, down 12%. While what was on NXT at the same time at 8:45.
Well, I know when the Tony Storm video
that was
played,
the John Cena.
Yeah. It's Davey had put out the side-by-side comparisons that here's Tony Storm driving her imaginary car as John Cena is entering the ring. So it was quite the dichotomy that we had between both programs at that given minute.
Right. So there we go. That is the raw looking right at my Excel spreadsheet where I do this stuff. So
how did you view the overrun? This would have, if I'm not mistaken, this would have been the longest overrun that Dynamite's ever done before at 14 minutes. I mean, it's very rare that they even do an overrun.
Well, what happened here? They went up 8% for this overrun where they were unopposed for about 5 minutes, right? So up 8%, down actually 2% in the demo. Yeah, you'd expect it to be up somewhat. That's about, I don't think there's anything that remarkable to take away there, right? NXT was up 3% for their 9-minute overrun, which had the Undertaker
coming out against the Undertaker, a legendary feud revived here in overrun fashion.
Yes. So yeah, up 11% for their overrun. NXT was, which had the Undertaker in it, and I think that's probably something that was more newsworthy and more interesting than what was going on in the overrun at that time for AEW.
How did you watch the shows on Tuesday night? Were you like actively like going back and forth? I mean, how engaged were you in the actual viewing of the programs? I'm just
I
curious if
had
anything like really landed for you in terms of beyond just like hot shotting for the night. Like if you felt anything meaningful was done by either program with these hopefully inflated audiences, especially for NXT.
I watched it with Dynamite on my TV, and I had NXT on the laptop. Um, I think W tried to couple all of the big main roster names with NXT people, right? Like you had Cena doing stuff with Braun Breaker, Undertaker. I don't know if that helped Braun Breaker for him to get chokeslam, but Undertaker doing stuff with Braun Breaker, and Undertaker kind of raising Carmelo Hayes' hand at the end. Cody doing stuff with Ilya Dragunov, who's their champion, and LA Knight doing stuff with Ilya Dragunov. So it wasn't at least like main roster people doing stuff with main roster people, and Asuka working with Roxanne Perez. So I think they made an effort to try to give people the rub. Did it really make a huge difference for these people? I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see in weeks to come if these ratings sustain as they've been doing really well lately. NXT is up tremendously, say year over year. Is this going to mean that NXT is going to be able to sustain an even higher rating than it was doing before? I would be skeptical of that, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
And I mean, the natural question, and maybe this won't be the case, but is there sort of like, is there just a come down after this that, the specialty of a Becky Lynch showing up is a bit less now after you've thrown everything at people, and now they've seen the Undertaker in person, they've seen John Cena, and in these following weeks, they've been able to take like one member and sometimes has made a large difference, but that's it could be the opposite. It could be like this was a springboard that is going to do enough of attaching some of these younger performers to these main roster stars, and it gave them a strong rub, and people come back next week because they're interested now in these characters and where they're building up towards.
And not much Becky Lynch. She was in a video, right? That was the extent of it. I was expecting maybe an in-person appearance, but with everything else they had going on, it wasn't like you were left, feeling like there wasn't enough on the show.
You got Shotzi on commentary as well, unannounced. So
yes,
Solo Sikoa running. I mean, they had plenty of surprise. I mean, honestly, they probably could have spread this out for 2 months between all these people that they had on this one night on NXT. But it was all out, and they got their desired outcome. This would have been a really tough pill to swallow if they were. I didn't think there was a prayer of them losing, really either side. But the demo was, to me, the only one that AEW would be able to threaten, and it was a comfortable win.
And Robert Sedman, who's at Sports TV Ratings on Twitter, reporting the rest of the sports TV ratings here.
We had one baseball game.
Orioles and Rangers, which was in prime time opposing these games, led. It did a 0.88 in the demo, 4.1 million viewers. The NHL, beginning of the NHL season, right, which was on ESPN, Chicago and Pittsburgh, doing a 0.51 in the demo, 1.4 million viewers. So that's lower total viewership, but higher in the demo. And then there was an earlier game with the Twins and Astros in the afternoon, pre-show, and then NXT. So NXT was more highly viewed in the demo than the late NHL game between Seattle and Las Vegas. Right underneath that is AEW, and then right underneath that is the early afternoon game, NHL game on ESPN, Nashville and Tampa.
The big bad NHL is back. I am curious how much that will be a factor in Canada, where it's basically a national holiday when the NHL comes back into everyone's lives.
So for a demo, now I've got some milestones here. For the demo, NXT, despite going head to head with Dynamite here, this is the highest demo that NXT has done since week 1 of the Wednesday Night War on October 2nd, 2019. This is the highest total viewership NXT has done since the week before the Wednesday Night War started on September 25th, 2019. So those 2 weeks that NXT had unopposed in September ahead of the Wednesday Night War, this was only short of that in terms of total viewership.
And they weren't that far off. Like week 1 was 1,179,000. Week 2 was 1,006,000. So they were they were within striking distance of what they were doing unopposed during the very first weeks on USA as well.
So there's that.
There's all the ratings. That is your breakdown. Do you think this was still Tony Khan's greatest birthday he ever celebrated, as he noted?
I can't speak for Tony Khan. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of negative reaction to the MJF and Juice Robinson interaction. So we'll see if anything comes out of that. But yeah.
Yeah, MJF posted a pretty lengthy statement a couple of hours ago defending the idea to do this. That's Angle. For those that did not tune in to the segment, I'm sure you've heard about it by now, but this was Juice Robinson bringing out a roll of quarters with Friedman written on the quarters, which is the reference that MJF has brought up in various promos about being a child when some kids threw quarters at him in a act of anti-Semitism because of him being Jewish. So that was the reference with the quarters. And I won't read this whole thing, but he did write, MJF, that is, this afternoon, Muhammad Hassan was portraying an evil Muslim terrorist. I'm actually Jewish. I've actually gone through this. This is my real life, my story. And I look forward to giving catharsis to every single person who's ever been oppressed or bullied. If you think I'd play with that or take it lying down or worst of all, hide from the hard conversations like a coward, you're on crazy pills. I look forward to the hard conversations this starts and creates. I look forward to people being further educated. My life's work is to stand up to any and all injustices done to people due to something as stupid as being different. To anyone who thinks that can't be done through the avenue of professional wrestling, then that's an indictment on things that have happened in this sport's past. I look forward to bringing this sport into the present. I look forward to knocking Juice Robinson's teeth down his throat. So this is obviously, he is very confident in telling this kind of a story in a professional wrestling setting. I think anyone that is feels inclined to be very negative towards this in a pro wrestling setting has more than enough evidence to support that skepticism. And I think with the timing of it this week, that it's almost not so much as however you want to frame this and where stories can go in a professional wrestling setting. If you are a pro wrestling company, if you're a broadcaster, are you comfortable with several of your heels being portrayed as anti-Semitic, however you want to define pro wrestling in the entertainment genre? On top of that, at a week where we are seeing in real time the horror that is going on involving Israel. And that just becomes something where it is beyond storytelling. It's a matter of taste and what amount of your audience is engaged in a story like this versus what amount of your audience is turned off by something like this. And if an angle is turning off more viewers than on, then it's not a great angle. And it seemed like there was a lot of backlash towards this. And I think pro wrestling's history has shown itself to be not exactly the creative outlet to tell very complex stories built upon, such subjects as this. That would be my thought.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, the comparison here to the Muhammad Hassan angle, the terrorist angle that they did, I believe, on July 7th, 2005, it was taped like the day before the 7/7 bombings in London and then aired the day after or on the day, I think, actually. So the comparison here is that there were,
there's a real world
heinous war crimes
going on,
crimes and terrorist attacks that happened in Israel. And this angle happened days after that has just begun.
Yeah. So, I mean, that it is, it was certainly, I think to most, it was the hot button issue of either night's show in terms of the handling of it and opting to go that direction. I would even argue, even without what is going on in the world this week, I think there would have been people that would have been certainly reluctant to see them go this route. But that was his response earlier today to that. Beyond the actual content of the show is a lot of the discussion that surrounded Tony Khan and just his way of promoting this show. It seemed to be that, Tony Khan, when he is aggressively promoting, he goes to an area that he knows is going to get the most amount. He's going to create as much noise as possible and knows like what areas are going to generate that kind of amplification of his product. Now you can argue about his style of promotion of whether it is effective or not effective, but it definitely is something that we saw turned up significantly in the volume. Like there is the there's the version of Tony Khan that we typically get in these media settings, and then there are the versions. I believe it was you that got the answer about, how much money he's got, and he's got a lot more money than Jim Crockett. It's almost like he can flip that switch into
All
like
I did was ask him about pay-per-view buys. How's this show doing?
and it was quite the answer that you got out of him. You typically always, I think, get the best out of Tony Khan, and yeah, I think it's really like he just turns into Dana White. I think that's sort of the mode he turns into. But it's seeing the juxtaposition. It's that Dana White, whatever you want to think about the man, I think everyone believes that's the way he is 24/7. And with Tony Khan, we get many different versions of him when it comes to his style of promotion.
Yeah, we get an animated, hyped up version of Tony Khan sometimes talking about when he's mad about something, when he's trying to, run a counter message against somebody. Like he was mad, I think, at Eric Bischoff for saying that CM Punk wasn't a draw, and he started pounding on the table and stuff like that. And at other times, we get a very evasive Tony Khan that wants to say a lot of things but doesn't really want to actually say much. I don't know. I wouldn't think of about Dana White, but like I feel like Dana White is. You could say a lot of bad things about Dana White, but I think he's at least. I feel like when I hear Dana White speak, he's telling me what's on his mind, and I feel like with Tony, you rarely get what's on his mind, except for in these weird outbursts. When he feels like he's facing adversity, I guess.
Yeah, he was on the Dan Le Batard show, and Dan Le Batard did push him to speak more about the CM Punk issue, but he was not going to divulge too much. But I mean, did indicate that he was very concerned for his well-being, without elaborating too much on that incident. But that is still going to be a topic that is brought up even with him gone from the company. But he was doing quite a lot of media. And as were several others. I know they had Mark Henry and Paul White doing a lot of media in the area, and they were able to move around 1,100 tickets in that final day for the show in Independence, Missouri. And the final ticket count from WrestleTix, I believe it was just over 3,500, which is not a spectacular number, but it was at least a healthy increase from where they were Monday night, where this was looking to be well under 3,000 tickets out for the show. And that's
3,621 was the final count.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this stage of the game, that's, I guess, a relatively average number for AEW, but not a tremendous number by any stretch. And those to me are like, as much as this was a big show, I would not be overwhelmed with what ticket movement there was for this show.
Yeah, I mean, it did at least get up over 3,000. And if you look at, I actually think I have a slide here. If you look at what they did previously in Independence, Missouri, they previously did on March 22nd, 2023. So earlier this year, they did 3,912. So a few hundred more. Before that, they did 4,357. Before that, they did 3,900. And before that, in 2020, they did 3,700. This is by a slight margin, the lowest number that they've done in this building, which, I mean, I guess it tells you how much of a draw Edge is here. He's not going to be this transformational star to this company that CM Punk was. So it's more in line of the trend that we've been seeing, where AEW's attendance hasn't been doing that well. But they did manage to do a number that's sort of in the neighborhood, if just below what they've done previously in this building.
Yeah, but just looking at like the next 2 weeks, and these were numbers as of last Friday of tickets out. So there might be some slight movement to these, but for this Saturday, Collision, they've got about 2,100 out. Next week, they're in Rosenberg, Texas, 2,300 out. The FedEx Forum, which is that's an NBA size venue, they're at just under 1,200 tickets out for Memphis, Tennessee on October 21st. And then Philadelphia, 2,600 out. So it's not like Independence, Missouri was just like one bad market or something like that. I mean, this is all the shows coming up. Like there is an undeniable softness in moving tickets. And there's something there that you have to be looking at what has taken the air out of the sales when it comes to moving tickets at levels beyond just like there is a downturn in the fan engagement.
And as soon as I said, the fact that this is kind of in the neighborhood of what they've done usually in the market, if a little bit below, I mean, this is a pretty important show for them perception-wise in terms of marketing and messaging and appearance. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a greater effort than usual to get free tickets in here, or to get seat fillers or something like that, or to get people in the building so that it looked good, because that was legitimately important for this show going head to head, for there not to be people, not give people the ability to say, hey, look, this building doesn't look like it's that full. So there was a good reason for them to get more people in here rather than fewer.
Before we move on to other topics, Sports 103 sends in the super chat. Thank you very much. Do you think that NXT having the higher viewership last week added any importance to how the two sides viewed winning this head to head? Having the higher viewership last week.
I don't think that played greatly into it, right? I mean, this show's been doing better and better, and I think whatever they were planning to do might have been already put in motion even before then. I think the fact that NXT is doing better in general probably gave them more confidence that they could, really decisively beat them.
Do you rule out the notion of these two shows ending up on the same night again in the future in another television rights cycle? Like, does this give you any?
I can't rule out these two shows not being on the same network in the future.
As a lead in for each other?
Can you imagine?
Or they air them both in picture on the same network?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, I have an interest. I think, if there's another Wednesday Night War or something of that nature, that's probably good for Wrestlenomics and how interested people are in it. So yeah, I guess for selfish interest, I hope that there's another head-to-head weekly competition in ratings. But I think there's good reason to believe that the next rights cycle is going to it's going to shuffle everybody up to the point where, like, yeah, I guess it's more likely than
then
not.
we'll be starting at 4 p.m. every week, the day after.
Yes, it's fairly likely that I mean, they're going to try to avoid each other, but it's if push comes to shove and there's some good reason why a network wants this show to be on this night and it just happens to have to go against another wrestling show, well, wrestling's not necessarily always going to take priority over other sports or other kinds of telecasts. I think that's possible, but I also think it's possible. I can't rule out that WBD is not going to take Raw here, because if you look at the ratings of Raw versus, let's say, NBA, it does, I think, on the average, a slightly lower rating. I'm sure it's got significantly higher ad rates, but in terms of the watch time that they both deliver, I think Raw would actually edge out the NBA on TNT, not overall, not including ESPN, but just on TNT. And if you're going to take one night away from TNT, which is something that's in the air, it's something that Nick Khan is saying he's hearing rumblings of, that they may give one night away and let NBC or someone have it. It might make a lot of sense in terms of being cost effective, just like how we talk about AEW being a very cost effective program. It might be really cost effective in WBD's view to maybe take Raw and give it a slight raise, or maybe give it a 50% raise over what it's getting currently, and it's $265 million. And you get a year-round show that delivers lower ad rates than the NBA, but probably more watch time. Maybe that's something that makes sense. Only Gunnar Weidenfeld's can really decide, I guess.
Yeah, and it also raises the question too about the viability of Tuesday nights on top of it. If you're looking at Raw staying on Monday, regardless of network, if I'm USA, I'm like, to me, Friday's just, I think there's so many reasons against it versus other opportunities during the week. Tuesday being, I think, a great way to funnel people from Monday to Tuesday rather than a Monday to Friday. I think that I just see SmackDown as this thing that it can be plugged into whatever hole you have in your schedule. And I don't know if Friday would be that night for it, but whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, that would certainly, I think, benefit a WWE production schedule. But we could also be talking about a world where NBC Universal does not have Raw and SmackDown is their prime wrestling content.
And like we talked about this a few weeks ago on Wrestlenomics Radio. Tell me how dumb of an idea this is. If I'm WBD and I'm the executives there, and if I really understand wrestling, if I took Raw, right, that's the one that's available, and maybe NXT as well, and put it on TNT or TBS, if WWE and AEW would work together, that would sure do great live event business. Network doesn't necessarily care about that, but I think if there was some sort of interpromotional interaction with these two companies, which is a huge if in terms of they can even trust each other and cooperate, but there would clearly be a ratings synergistic effect if you had talent, appearing on either. And WBD seems to be the one that would have the power to make that happen. Just looking at this head-to-head ratings war that we had last night, there's tremendous interest, and there's the sum is greater than the parts here. Or what's the expression? You know what I'm trying to say? That there's greater interest in wrestling in general on a night like this, where I don't know what were the two numbers that we just looked at, 921,000 plus 600. I mean, that's a number on the level of what Raw does, or better than what Raw is doing currently on Monday night against football.
0.56 if you're adding the two demos together.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're the ones who would have the power to maybe get them to work together. And there's clearly a synergistic effect there that only you can unlock. You can't unlock it if you have one and not the other. So is that something that I should just, stop thinking about? Or is that, is this like a legitimate idea if, David Zaslav can realize that there's really an opportunity there, or there are other hurdles and things in the way to even prevent that from being a realistic possibility?
I don't want to have a line that's like isolated for a cold wrestling.
This is something that you can only say in audio. You can't tweet about it.
Yeah, I would not tweet this. It would be held to my till my deathbed. But I just number one, it is WWE, and you just cannot fathom that. I guess that would be what is beyond just financial value of its next contract, of lifting up in their mind, lifting up AEW to be an equal to them, and being in a partnership essentially with your strongest competitor that we can look at. And there are the competitive nature that we see in front of everybody, and then there's the competition that goes on behind the scenes between these companies, of how it would be, how WWE would enter this as a willing partner. And it would have to be a situation to me where they are so out of other options that this idea of being in-house with your chief competitor would be somehow willingly accepted.
Yeah, I can make an argument though that if you look over the history of when promotions have had interpromotional interactions, interpromotional feuds, or whatever, it's almost always right that the stronger promotion comes out on top. So if you're WWE, I could make the argument that it's maybe it's actually it's a covert way to sort of diminish AEW, because we're the by far stronger company. We'll probably, even if you're only taking one or two of our shows, we maybe have a greater financial stake in what WBD would be paying us. So we're the bigger entity, and maybe we have an advantage in the creative machinations and all that. So maybe you end up with a diminished AEW in some sense afterward. But then again, we're talking about an AEW that is controlled by a billionaire, not UWFI or something like that.
And also would be in such a way that for AEW to be incentivized, like their next television rights deal, I mean, it should be of a level that securely puts them into a level of profitability that is going to make them the second largest revenue generating wrestling company in pro wrestling history. What this next contract should represent for them. It's, I don't know if it's, to me, this next contract for AEW, it truly does represent like the point of like the talk of AEW's demise sort of has to be shut at a certain point once they are comfortably profitable and you have this amount of revenue that is guaranteed every year.
Yeah. If the deal is big enough, and what does that mean? I think it has to be well over $100 million a year. Maybe something closer to, I mean, a $200 million a year deal over the course of 5 years would be the $1 billion deal that CM Punk sort of vaguely alluded to once, and that Tony actually himself sort of alluded to it as well at one time. So yeah, I think it has to be about 150, something like that, and you can always adjust your budget and things like that to get under. But yeah, it has to be something, I think, well over $100 million a year.
You're getting everybody now fantasizing that final Nitro.
The
contract said Khan, but not Tony Khan. And out walks Big Bad Nick. the next figure on our television screens.
Yeah, they definitely don't want to. I mean, Tony, and I guess that's it. You don't want to punch down, but Tony's glad to punch up. Like Tony will say stuff on the record, and what we get from the WE side is, so and so close to the situation said that they really want to show them that they only beat our developmental league.
How does WWE trumpet this ratings victory? Do you sense them acknowledging it in any meaningful way? Like, I think if it was the other way around, I think AEW, and I would think that they should do this, would be making a huge deal about like a victory, but the other way around, like as you mentioned, like punching down. Like, do you see WWE at all mentioning this? Or the most watched wrestling program anywhere on Tuesday night was NXT.
I mean, I would have to look around. We're on the air right now, but I would think you let the media do it. And maybe you give the media information to make sure that they get out the points that you want them to get out. And, I think it's no coincidence that at times when W does a really good rating, I'm not the only one who can get access to ratings data, that more people do, and, can say that, WB did, X% better than whatever comparison point.
Okay, well, if Nick Khan wants the StreamYard link, we can make that happen. We're on the air for another 15 minutes or so. But another super chat here from Louie. Thank you for sending this in. MJF and Adam Cole segments get big ratings. Why? I hate it. Am I out of touch? I do see some backlash online, but that's seemingly a vocal minority. Well, number one, I don't think you should always anticipate or associate your version of what is a good or quality segment with the numbers it generates. Sometimes they don't always correlate, but historically, I mean, especially MJF has been a meaningful difference maker for AEW. But any thoughts, Brandon?
The quarter hours, you can't just look at 1 week of quarter hours or one instance of quarter hours to say that something is actually improving ratings or something like that. You want a preponderance, and there have been a preponderance of MJF and Adam Cole segments that have done well. Not necessarily these videos that we've been seeing lately in recent weeks, but their live promos in the ring, in the arena, on the show. Those, have again and again occupied the crossover segment going into the second hour, and that's done really well on numerous occasions since. I mean, going back before All In. It's a more complex issue to talk about, whether the comedy that's happening and the goofiness that's happening with Adam Cole and Roderick Strong and the degree to which MJF's involved in that, whether that's really a good idea for business. There's some who would argue, look at the attendance. The attendance is not doing very well, is it? And the ratings are doing okay for Dynamite. The ratings are very stable. But I think, there's the point is the data doesn't give you a clear answer. Data. You would think that data would give you the definitive, absolute answer about whether something is good or bad. But data is just a light that you shine onto this object, and maybe it's a really powerful light that will show you everything that you want to know. But a lot of times, it's a much smaller light, and you don't really get to see everything that you want to get to see to give you the answer that you want.
We go to the great John Cena. How beneficial was the buy-in for AEW? This was the 30-minute online special that they did with Eddie Kingston against Minoru Suzuki. Whenever they're in need of a last-minute, that Minoru Suzuki, he's got like the red bat phone that is just linked to Tony Khan's iPhone, and he was there in the clutch. So this was streaming on X, on YouTube, various social platforms. I was watching it on YouTube, and it peaked by the end, just over 50,000 viewers.
This is a global number, by the way.
Global number, yes.
And the ratings that we're talking about today are United States only.
Yes. So to answer the question, I think minimal, if any. I think it is servicing your AEW consumer that was probably already had their viewing pattern set for the night. If they're logging on a half hour earlier for more wrestling content, I don't know if it's directly changing anything other than it's a lead up. I would have been curious if TBS had gone to the extent of trying to start the show earlier, which was always something that Raw tried to do way back with Nitro, and they would go on at like 7:57 and trying to get the jump on people. We talk about overruns, not enough underruns. But to answer John's question, it was an extra match, and I don't think it played any factor. Obviously not, like, based on where we saw that first quarter for NXT. I mean, it was a huge quarter for them.
Dynamite's first quarter was strong too, but it also had the Big Bang Theory as usual. Even on a Tuesday night, Big Bang Theory offering that lead in for Dynamite. It's fine. There's no cost. I don't think there's any risk in doing what they did either. They're already there. They're not. I'm sure it doesn't cost them much, if anything, to just stream an extra half hour on YouTube. So it's almost like you might as well. It's a marketing effort.
Did they fly Suzuki over for this? Did he have to like jump onto
I don't
a plane?
know. Where was he wrestling last?
That's a good question. He was on the show on Monday. He was on the Ryogoku card.
Really?
Yeah, he was in the 6-man, the best of 7 series. So yeah, he was Monday morning, our time. He was wrestling in Sumo Hall, and Tuesday night he was in Independence, Missouri, which I don't know if there's too many direct flights from Tokyo to Independence.
I feel like he's in the United States so much that maybe he was, and he's still working New Japan and all that on a regular basis.
Yes, on pretty regular basis. So, yeah, I mean, probably a lot of miles that he logged. He's got to have one of those Nexus passes by now, I would think, to just clear through security. I'm fact checking myself here to make sure he was part of the 6-man. Yeah, it was him, Ren Narita, and El Desperado, losing to Yuji Nagata, Shota Umino, and Master Wato. So that was Monday. So I'm imagining he was probably a pretty late call to just come on over, wrestle Eddie Kingston, and then fly home after your 11-minute match.
Right. Yeah, on the month, NXT is up 72% in the demo here as I'm looking through numbers.
Let's talk about a couple more topics. We won't get to all of them today because there was a lot of focus, obviously, on Tuesday night. But let's chat a bit about Collision. So this past Saturday, they started at 7 Eastern time, an hour earlier than usual, and did 353,000 viewers and a 0.09 in the demo. So overall, they were up 8% and 13% in the demo from the week prior, which was the least watched Collision in history. But in seeing the breakdown hour by hour, it was, moving it up an hour. People were not used to tuning in at 7, and it was actually the hour that went against Fastlane that did have more viewership than the first hour. So I wouldn't look at this as a great conclusion you can make out of moving it up an hour. I think this is more just indicative of viewership habits, and probably, like, I heard firsthand from people that follow AEW that had no clue that it was on at 7 p.m. And sometimes it takes a long time to get people into that habit of a new start time.
Yeah, I mean, it tells you how beneficial it is to be in prime time. It's somewhat surprising that against the main roster pay-per-view, this did manage to do slightly better than it did last week against an NXT PLE. So, yeah, I mean, it helped probably to some extent that they were on at 7 and not opposed by a WWE show. And it also probably hurt to some extent that they were 1 hour out of prime time. And then the hour that they were in, I'm sure they were hurt by the fact that they were going against a WPLE. So it's sort of all just sort of broke even, as you can see here on the chart, doing something like 25,000 extra viewers on average than they did the prior week.
And then we had, next week, Collision is listed for 8 p.m. on TNT. And also, are you aware, Brandon,
there's on the schedule.
There's a Battle of the Belt special next Saturday.
I did see that on the schedule.
So
another 3-hour night.
Oh my goodness. That's going head to head with Bound for Glory. Not good for Impact Wrestling.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to have a big impact on AEW, but yeah, probably Impact.
UFC news. This is an interesting one. They announced on Wednesday that they will be going to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia as part of a Riyadh season next March the 2nd, in conjunction with the Saudi General Entertainment Authority. And why is that well known to professional wrestling audiences?
Because WWE does business with the Saudi General Entertainment Authority. And in fact, His Excellency Advisor Turki Al-Ashiki, who's quoted, I don't know if he's quoted in here, but he's the one who's going to, who's made this deal, and who, it says the agreement for this event will be signed in the presence of His Excellency Advisor Turki Al-Sheikh, who's the chairman of the board. He's the guy who held up the belt, the big green belt, with Braun Strowman on the first Saudi show. And we've seen him in press conferences for WWE also. So I would think that this is not just an event that they're going to run in Riyadh and just sell tickets to, but that there's probably some sort of site fee associated with this.
What an assumption I think you are making. I think absolutely there's going to be. Is this this is quite the turnaround when you look at Ari Emanuel, although not an unexpected one if you have followed his public stance and how it has softened over the years. He famously turned a $400 million investment from the Saudi government away after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. Spoke about this at length of like the concern he had for his life after this event. And in years past, I mean, he has just he was recently on Freakonomics not too many months ago and spoke about the fact that I mean,
all countries do bad things was how he explained it.
All these governments, they all do things.
All governments are bad.
Yeah, this is
especially the ones that tax me.
All one and the same, according to Ari Emanuel. And to the point, I believe one of the question was like, why did you give the money back? It's like, I don't even know why. I mean, it was, and here he is. And this was, I mean, first there was the question of Endeavor getting into business, partnering with WWE with this existing deal. But I mean, this, is further, like UFC has never gone to Saudi Arabia before. And there's so much money to be made. And that is why you were going to get Tyson Fury taking on Francis Ngannou in a couple of weeks in Saudi Arabia. We have Crown Jewel the next weekend. And now they can add UFC to the mix as well.
Yeah. I mean,
and follows the investment as well into PFL recently by the Saudi government too.
And by the way, like if the TKO merger doesn't happen, does UFC announce they're doing a show in Riyadh today?
I would think there's a decent chance not.
With the same guy who's the face of the WWE deal?
It seems like this was a certainly you have to look at that connection that just put all the parties into synergy with one another, and boom, we've got a UFC event, and pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And the last thing we will note, New Japan and Stardom held a business presentation this week, and they shared a bunch of news here. New Japan noting that in fiscal 2023, so their year runs until what, the end of June, I believe.
I think that's right.
I think it's around that. But anyway, fiscal 2023,
yeah, right.
They generated a 5.3 billion yen, which roughly translates. You've got the graph here on the screen. Whereas previous to the pandemic, their high point in 2019 was 5.4 billion yen. So this is revenue. This is not profit for the company. So look at these beautiful graphs here from Brandon. Meanwhile, Stardom, if anything, it's remarkable how much they have grown, and this is even through the pandemic. This past fiscal year, generating about $10 million US. Which in 2019, $1.34 million. So they have increased their business significantly over these last couple of years, which have been very trying times for any Japanese promotions.
Yeah, I want to say these details came out a few weeks ago, but yeah, I mean, it shows the growth of Stardom, and to put it in some context, $10 million. That's that's maybe a few episodes of a WWE show to give you an idea of how much bigger the other companies are. But that's tremendous growth from where they were in 2019. They've nearly 10x that, so they're doing very well.
Let me ask you this: is the worth of the Elite's contract extensions with AEW more than Stardom makes in a year? The
entire term of the contract, probably.
Let's go with by year. Do you think that the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and Hangman Page make more in 1 year under this new contract than Stardom did in 2023?
That's how many people? 2 bucks.
2 bucks.
One
Hangman, and
4 people.
A Winnipegger.
4 people. What do you think average there? 2 million at least just to get to 10. Well, we're at 8 that way. But maybe 2.5 million each. That gets us to what?
I could see them flirting with like 3 above. I could see that
in new contracts. Yeah, maybe.
That's staggering when you look at it of the difference here. But I mean, nonetheless, like this is remarkable growth that Stardom has made during this time. They also added they will do Historic Crossover 2 sometime in 2024. They are redesigning New Japan World effective November 9th. For all of you iOS, Android, Roku, and Amazon users, there will be new apps for it, offline streaming, and HD streams that will be coming. So November 9th. I guess they want to celebrate the anniversary of the Montreal Screwjob with.
And your NJPW subscription, NJPW World subscription will be increasing at that time too, right?
That's right. They also have the price increase. Yeah, that detail was, I think, omitted in the presentation. But yes, you will also be getting an increase on that, which, I mean, they have not increased their price. To be fair to them, I don't think they've increased it once during this entire time. I have been subscribing to that thing since it launched. That was 2014 that they launched New Japan World. So there we have it. They're going to Taipei. Maybe
That
Brandon
again,
and I will.
doesn't like the Japanese yen like never inflates. I know they're having. I see stuff in the news about them having inflation issues now, but there's something about like inflation of the yen does not happen like it does to at least the U.S. dollar. But anyway,
Yeah. Well, and then Stardom, they are not going to be part of Wrestle Kingdom this year. Instead, they will be running their own standalone show January 4th in the afternoon, so as not to conflict, at Tokyo Dome City Hall. And that will be headlined by an IWGP Women's Championship match. Big increase in shows this past year. They were up to 141 in 2023, and those were some of the major takeaways from the Stardom and New Japan announcements.
Yes.
And finally, the TKO, the first TKO earnings report, will be released Tuesday, November 7th at, wait for it, 5 p.m. Eastern time, the death time. So at this particular time on November 7th, we will get the first earnings report. So they are making it in very close proximity. We will be live the next day, so we can go through this. And I'm very excited about the very first TKO earnings call.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns in terms of like who's going to actually talk on these. Probably Ari, probably Mark Shapiro.
What is the Vince word count going to be? I predict
0.
Vince will be on this call. You think none?
No. You want to wager something on that? Vince is not going on this call.
I'm going to predict we get Vince with 30 words or less. We're going to get a take it away. Nick for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we get Ari opening address, throws it to Nick, who then who's going to be the UFC rep? I don't see Dana on these.
You don't think Dana?
What's up, everybody? What's up, GOP?
he never appeared on the Endeavor calls, and in UFC was UFC more than half of the Endeavor business?
Yes,
but never appeared on the calls.
No, Dana was never on the calls, to the best of my recollection. So anyway, a lot of heavyweights that are up for positions on these calls, and we will see what they are asked, and especially the stock. Like, it's been underwhelming.
Yeah, stock has not been performing well. Brandon Ross of Lightshed wrote a piece about that the Saudi deal, UFC doing a show in Saudi Arabia, should give investors some reassurance, because it tells you that, well, they're willing to do business with UFC, so they're not trying to put UFC out of business necessarily with their investment in the Professional Fighters League, which is maybe a competitor to the UFC. Stock price is not exactly rebounding on this news, though. As I look here, the market is closed today, and this news did come out before the close of the market, so it was out there for a few hours at least. And the stock TKO still closed down 3% on the day.
Yeah, that was a crazy reaction that they had after the PFL deal.
2%, excuse me.
I think a lot of people figuring out what PFL was that same day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. You are all caught up to date. Again, the NXT ratings notes. It was NXT with a commanding victory, a 0.30 to a 0.26, and a much more sizable win in overall viewership, as it was NXT averaging 921,000 viewers and AEW Dynamite 609,000 viewers, as they return to their night of the week next week on Wednesday. And we will see if there is any fallout from this, whether there is a victory lap from WWE or memes aplenty from Tony Khan.
Yeah. So, sorry if I sounded distracted on this broadcast. I'm trying to get like the ratings reports out and stuff, but the quarter hours will
Brandon,
be out soon.
If anything, we should have had like a GoPro around your forehead just to see your process as you are taking in these numbers in real time.
I had scripting issues this whole time. There were issues with NAND values, not a number values, that I had to wrestle with. Oh my God.
No, I enjoyed this a lot. I like doing the real-time reaction to the numbers. And I think a lot of people enjoyed it as well. So thank you to everyone for tuning in live at this special start time. We will be back next Wednesday in our regular slot at 3 p.m. Eastern time, unless they decide to go head-to-head again on Tuesday night.
Do it.
Or something. And are you guys cowards? Come on. Last question. Do you expect anything near this level of interest from either side towards that Collision, SmackDown head to head, because that's one. It's like there's no competing with SmackDown on Fox. Like this would be a different question if it was on FS1
that night. Sorry.
What's that?
I wouldn't be surprised to see Collision start at 7 on that night.
Possible, yeah. Like if you're AEW, like obviously you don't throw in the towel, but I don't know if you throw everything in the kitchen sink at that show either. It's just, I mean, you're competing with, like, you're not coming at all within distance of SmackDown. To me, it's one that, yeah, it's head to head, but is like you're just
and it's AEW off of its normal slot onto a Friday instead. So is there going to be Rampage? Is this going to be another huge block of?
It's probably going to be 3 hours. I'm thinking, yeah.
I
think it's, and that's the night before the pay-per-view, the Full Gear show. Like that's why it's happening on Friday. So anyway, you have that to look forward to for people that are just gluttons for the head-to-head competition. All right, that's going to wrap it up. But coming back this Sunday for members at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, it is Jesse Collins, Chris Gullo, and Brandon Thurston, as they will be bringing you all of the post head-to-head takes from all over the globe and making sense of what's happening in the wrestling business world. So that's coming up on Sunday. I'm not going to ask you what's coming up because the cycle moves at such a pace. We don't know on a Wednesday what's going to be making news on Sunday.
I write the show on Friday usually. I make slides on Friday and then throughout Saturday as well. So it's a process that will begin in a couple of days from now.
Well, I'm very excited to promote what's coming up tonight with John Pollock at postwrestling.com. Ladies and gentlemen, all viewers, listeners, coming up tonight, nothing. No show. I'm off, and I've taken in way too much wrestling. So that's going to be it. I'm not back until Friday night with Way. So you can tune into Rewind to SmackDown. We appreciate all those that tuned into our attempt to review both NXT and AEW on Tuesday night. Obviously, transmission issues not just affecting TBS, but yes, the post office too hit with a lightning bolt of connectivity as well.
How's my connection been? Has it been good?
Crystal clear, beautiful. Coming in.
Fantastic.
A+. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And that is going to wrap up Pollock and Thurston for another week. So have a great week. We'll chat with you in 7 days.